Okay, so hello and welcome to our panel on engineering biology in grad school, hosted by the Engineering Biology Research Consortium Student and Postdoc Association. I'm Ross. I'm a postdoc in Peter Zandstra's lab at the University of British Columbia, and I'm going to be the host for this panel today. I'm going to, on the next slide, let each of the panelists introduce themselves, and then we'll get into our discussion. We have several prepared questions, and then after we get through those ones, we will allow questions from the audience. So hopefully there will be plenty of time for that. So without further ado, these are our panelists for today. They all have their videos on and can give a wave to everyone. So I will let each of them sort of give a brief overview of their path into engineering biology research. Some of them are grad students, some are postdocs, as you can see, and what they're working on now and what their favorite thing is about engineering biology. So why don't we just go left to right here, starting with Ava, and then I'll go at the end.
Cool. Hi, everyone. My name is Ava. I am currently a fourth-year PhD candidate at the University of Washington in the chemical engineering department. I'm currently working with Doctors Carruthers and Zalatin, and we study and build CRISPR tools in bacteria really broadly. In undergrad, I was at Arizona State University. I did degrees in chemistry and microbiome. And there I actually was working in a biochemistry lab. And so I was working in studying cystic fibrosis in lung microbiomes, which is very, very different than what we do here in the Carruthers and Zalatin labs. And so now in the Carruthers and Zalatin labs, I'm working on both CRISPR tools, like I said before, but also in building cell communication and novel bacterial cell signaling. Yeah, and so I guess we can pass it on. So, Gabby, want to go next?
Hello. My name is Gabby. I am a current PhD candidate in my third year at Princeton in the molecular biology department. I am working in the donor lab, and I'll come back to that. I did my undergrad at Cornell, graduated in 2019. I majored in biological sciences, concentrated in systematics and biotic diversity, looking mostly at environmental and sustainability sciences. I worked in a few labs, including an ichthyology lab, so looking at fish, and then a plant virology lab. I actually spent 2 years in between undergrad and grad working at the Broad Institute, and that's where I really got interested in synthetic biology. So I was working on a project that specifically was looking at genetic code expansion in E. coli. And then here at Princeton, I'm in the molecular biology department, as I mentioned, and I'm primarily focused on marine macroalgae symbioses. So interactions between bacteria and macroalgae and understanding those and looking for marine natural products and how to capitalize on those. With that, I will pass it along.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ice. My real name is Chunvisit Ketisevi, but Ice is a lot easier. I'm originally from Thailand, and I did my undergrad and master in Thailand and worked there for a year before coming here. So I'm actually like similar to Ava. I worked with James Carruthers and JC Zalatin at UW, working on bacterial synthetic biology projects. Before coming here, I was actually doing synthetic chemistry research in my undergrad and master. And I feel like I want to try different things to make like the chemical synthesis like way greener and easier. And that's what drew me into synthetic biology and engineering biology. So I first like shift to work for a year in the biocatalysis lab, where we work on enzymes and trying to study how enzyme works and also use it for chemical synthesis as well. Then I was like, let's just move into the cells, and that's how I come to UW to work in bacteria, not just E. coli, but like in the different bacteria. We make tools. We try to use the tools to make different systems, including making chemicals. And I just graduated 2 months ago, but I'll stick with the lab to like get the work done, and also like looking forward to the the next career sort of thing. So I think that's it. Yeah, I'll maybe Heidi can talk next.
Thanks, Ice. My name is Heidi. I went to undergrad at North Carolina State University, where I also studied chemical engineering. But like halfway through, this new PI showed up who was doing something called synthetic biology. And I think what I loved about that was we were working on a different version of like the CRISPR-Cas system, and the idea was to reprogram it to target the genome, so it could be like an antibiotic. And I think that's what I love about engineering biology, the idea that there are like things that biology can do that kind of don't exist yet, but we could build. I thought that would be really fun. And then for grad school, I went directly, I guess actually I did a year abroad and I like studied literature, so that was fun. But then I went to Caltech for grad school and I worked for Michael Elowitz, and I like totally switched into like studying developmental biology, but like using synthetic biology tools to try to understand cell signaling. I think that's something else I love about engineering biology, the idea of like if we can build and reconstitute minimal versions of things, we can learn how biology works. So I think that's something else that I enjoy a lot, and also what I'm now trying to do in my postdoc at Boston University.
All right, thanks, guys. So as I said, I'm Ross. I'm a postdoc at the University of British Columbia in Canada. Go Maples Leafs, except for not the team. I don't care about them. So I'm not actually Canadian. I'm just masquerading up here. I actually did my undergrad at the University of Washington long before Ava and Ice were there. I did bioengineering there. I did biological engineering in my PhD at MIT, and now I'm in a biomedical engineering department. So my path has been very much on the bioengineering direction. In undergrad, I sort of became interested in synthetic biology, partly because I was doing some research on the molecule artemisinin, which is this sort of anti-malarial drug, and we were studying it for potential effects on cancer, which was kind of fun. And I read about this research where scientists down at Berkeley, Jay Kiesling's lab, were producing this with microbes, and I thought that was super cool. So I became interested in bioproduction and engineering cells and things like that. And so I got into synthetic biology for grad school, worked with Ron Weiss at MIT doing mammalian synthetic biology, and specifically trying to bring sort of control systems into cells. So for people from an engineering background, be familiar with things like integral feedback control and those sorts of concepts. And so we were interested to implement that inside of mammalian cells. And now I'm taking this towards engineering development. And so we're producing immune cells from pluripotent stem cells, which is a renewable source of cells for cell therapy. And the goal is to be able to bring tools from engineering biology into this kind of space for both manufacturing of the therapeutic cells and then also for eventually controlling the therapeutic cells themselves. So what I love about engineering biology is there's just so many things you can do with it. There's applications in climate science, and there's a lot of people in SPA within our field or in the Student and Postdoc Association that are working on bioenergy or on how to do sort of renewable production of all kinds of things with microbes, how to create new therapies, how to break down toxic products or detect them in the environment. There's just so many cool things that we can use with biology. And so that gets me really excited. Okay. So I guess speaking of what we can do with engineering biology, I think a good thing to start with would be career prospects within the space and what you can do sort of at different levels. And so there's a lot of questions in the registration forms and just in general that we get as sort of people that are already in the space. You know, if I have a bachelor's, if I have a master's, if I have a PhD, if I have a postdoc, what can I do? And what do I need to do to be able to get into this field? And so I'll pass this off to the panel and see if anybody has any thoughts about what's out there and then sort of what the different levels of engagement or like career prospects you have.
I might start from like the basic. You have like a bachelor's degree, which I know a lot of you do have, since it's sort of similar to my trajectory. So straight out of undergrad, I already mentioned that I primarily focused on plant biology, did a little bit of ichthyology, which like are pretty two very distinct fields. And in my senior year, I took a computational biology class, sort of got to know more about engineering biology and synthetic biology, and was like, oh my God, this is fascinating. And so I knew that research was sort of in my future, but I wasn't sure exactly what field. And so what I chose to do, like with my bachelor's in hand, was to apply to different research associate positions. And so for me, like I was a research associate specifically at the Broad Institute, and they have like different programs there that help people with bachelor's, like one, develop their own research projects, get funding, and then also apply to grad school afterwards. So those 2 years for me were pretty influential. I got 2 papers out, I got a patent, we have another paper coming, and it just like is one way to sort of get your foot in the door and like start doing this research without necessarily having a degree in engineering. So that's definitely one option, like applying for research associate position, seeing if this is something you want to do. The way that I went about it was like directly asking PIs and emailing PIs about projects that I was particularly interested in and to see if they had funding. And so would highly encourage people to do that. Another option is looking, as I mentioned at the Broad, like specific overarching programs. So there are programs like within an institute. This one is specifically academia adjacent. So it's not an academic institution, but it's like, yeah, adjacent. So there are a lot of like professors at MIT and Harvard who have lab spaces at the Broad. And so that was like an overarching program that you can apply to that then matches you up with different labs. So those are 2 of the options that you could do. And I'll pass it on to the next person.
Can I add something on that real quick? So my background was not doing, I like went straight from undergrad and straight into graduate school. So I didn't have that like experience that I was talking about earlier, but I did work in national labs before coming to graduate school. And so something that I really want to point out to all of you is that you don't have to be in the academic space to get synthetic biology research. A lot of these national labs, whether it's the DOE facilities, the labs that I worked in was at NASA. They have like specific synthetic biology labs there. And I did like a 3-month thing at NASA where I was just like a research associate, but they also have like year-long research associate and scientist positions for people coming straight out of undergrad. And so if that's something interesting to you, I think there's a lot of opportunities, especially in the areas that Ross was talking about with like renewable energy focused research, especially at a lot of the DOE facilities for people to jump in. Like start working.
To follow up on your guys' 2 things about breaking into this field. So there were some questions about sort of how much experience do you need if you want to go to grad school? How much do you need to have done as an undergraduate? What's like your opinion on this matter? Having yourself gone in and then also seeing other students that come into your labs.
Let me try state my situation briefly. So changing field is something that people in engineering biology do all the time. And you're not, as long as you are sure that you want to shift and you have like some proof that like you are like trying to shift, I think it's not a big deal to shift the field at all. Like for example, I study organic chemistry in my undergrad and master, and I'm like, let's do engineering biology. And my degree was nothing about biology or engineering, right? So like it's not that easy to come. And like when I was applying for a PhD program, and I applied to like let's say chemical engineering, because like there's a chem in it, and it sounds like close enough, even though I have no idea what engineering is. I was like having a lot of suggestion about like maybe you can like if you have time and you're not you don't want to come into like the grad school right away, you can try to like explore the research more in the engineering field apart from like the pure science that I've been working on so far. And that was a pretty good advice. I learned a lot by like trying to learn more on the engineering side, learn more biochemistry, learn more biology, and that's sort of like when I try to write my statement or like prepare myself for the grad school, that turns out to be a lot easier than like trying to say like, hey, I'm pretty good with chemistry, I want to do biology in the cells, something like that. So I feel like if you're like from something pretty far away and you want to shift, like try to get some connections that is drawing you closer to what you are fascinated with or what you want to work on. Like it doesn't have to be, a full-time job. It could be like a program or something that you can, work with people who know what it really is. And that's gonna help a lot in terms of like encourage people, not just you, but like people who will be working with you that like you're ready to shift the field.
I was just going to add one thing also, which is like If you apply to a PhD program, you're admitted by the department, which includes professors who are doing a broad range of things. So likely you don't even have to have like abundant clarity about what it is that you want to do. And probably in your first year, you'll do a rotation program where you're explicitly asked to work on things that are very different. So I think like it is actually like the perfect moment, and it's sort of a degree designed to like give you experiences and new training. So I don't think you have to worry quite too much about sort of being really productive and like demonstrating a lot of things. Like I'm thinking that I mentor a grad student right now who is starting her second year, and she had almost no research experience because she spent most of her undergrad at home during the pandemic. But I think she had relevant coursework, and basically she's like very hardworking and smart. And so she's doing really, really well in the lab, I think, even though we're taking a lot of time to train her, and I'm very happy to work with her. And there's another grad student in the lab who the pandemic happened at the beginning of her PhD. So she actually went to go work in industry, and now she's come back. And that experience has also helped her. So I guess I see both here, and I really think the kinds of things that make someone successful, you can sort of demonstrate without being like, oh, I need to have a paper or something like this. Although, of course, that's like excellent and will definitely help.
Okay, one more comment, just specifically about coming from undergrad and switching fields. I know it's sometimes daunting, like if you don't have the background in like the classes and you want something a little bit more structured. And so there are like these MOOCs, like online courses that you can take. Other postbac programs have specific money that you can then use at other undergrad institutions to take supplementary classes, which can then like, once again, help your application for grad school if that's something that you're looking for as well. So I just wanted to put that out there in case you haven't taken the classes. Also not the end of the world, even if you're a senior.
Yeah, so I just dropped a link in for a class that I may have worked on a little bit. So check it out, Principles of Synthetic Biology. It's a free edX course. And I may have written like half the lecture notes. So, you know, I won't tell you which half. But anyway, yes, there's a lot of great things out there to learn. And like when I came into synthetic biology, I knew basically nothing about cloning and stuff. I was just really excited about it. It helped to have like a pretty good like background in engineering and modeling and things like that to be able to pick up how to do that side of things. But you know, you certainly don't need to know how to do every little bit of lab work. Hopefully, though, you'll have done some so that you're at least familiar with the general idea of how to operate within an environment. But if you're coming from a computational background and you want to get into wet lab or vice versa, that's totally cool. Most labs are going to be perfectly happy to train you in sort of what you want to do, as long as your interests and the interests of the lab are sort of aligned. Before we dive a little bit more into like finding a lab though, I want to talk about the other side of it. So we talked about sort of getting into this field, and then want to talk a little bit about what you can do with your degree. And so if you're coming out as an undergraduate, it's going to be a little bit harder to break into like an industry position unless you have a very specific set of skills that they're looking for. And so even some of these like bridging programs where, you know, if you're interested in the field, you can go and do one of these programs that, for example, Gabby talked about, that could potentially also set you up for an industry position. But industry tends to hire on skills. And so they're looking for sort of what you know now. Academia is looking for your interests and your sort of ability to learn and grow as an individual. And then on the other side of the pipeline, once you graduate with your PhD, then once again, if you're looking at industry, they're looking for your skills, your like what techniques you know, but they're also looking at things now like your ability to lead a team and other sorts of things that like a PhD scientist in industry would be expected to do. And so wondering if the panel has some other comments on sort of these industry relevant skills, as well as maybe some of the non-industry careers that somebody with a PhD could break into.
I can start quickly. Just I may not have a bunch of experience, but I spent a summer working at Amyris in the Bay, which actually is Jay Kiesling's company, or like started by Jay Kiesling, like related to like using yeast to make artemisinin. And what I sort of was surprised to learn there is that there's sort of like two tiers of scientists. And one of them is like, they would call them like associate scientists. And those people had bachelor's degrees. And then there was like scientist, and those people tended to have grad school and postdocs. And basically kind of like Ross was saying, the like sort of lower tier, or the people that had come straight from undergrad, were working a lot at the bench and doing the experimental techniques. And then the people who were sort of slightly higher level were maybe like deciding what the experiments should be, or maybe also doing some of the work themselves. So I think that's like one way to sort of think about industry positions, although I don't think it's always that clear cut. Something that was interesting in that company is you could spend some time as associate scientist and then build up and basically like earn your way to the scientist level. Not all companies do that. But yeah, that was for explicitly like we engineer yeast. And there were lots of different parts of that. Like maybe you're working on the robots that engineer the yeast, you're doing the chemistry to sort of check that the yeast are making what they're supposed to make, you're engineering the strains, you're writing software so people can analyze their data to know what the yeast are actually making. So lots of different intersections, I guess, with other fields. But yeah, I think a lot of industry maybe is sort of like that sort of the undergrad degree can really get you into the like, lab positions. And then the more experience you have, I guess like if you get a master's, you can get the like lab experience. And then with a PhD, you might get a more managerial or like strategic role.
What about non-industry?
I have academic, like adjacent industry, which I feel like maybe is going to be the bridge. And I think one of the biggest skills that I learned is like, and this also probably seems self-evident, especially if people are going to go to grad school, but like it is what you make of it. And so there's no one who's going to be there like holding your hand, walking you through the steps. And so it's a matter of like finding the resources, talking to people, socializing, network, going to conferences, going to talks in different fields, like get other ideas. So I just wanted to also throw that out from like my little experience.
Yeah, another thing I'll bring up is it's not super common, but a relatively common career trajectory for people with PhDs is actually to go into policy. And so when I was in grad school, there was this whole student club that organized around policy around science, so science policy basically. And they would organize trips to DC to go and, see what was going on in the federal government, meet with your home state legislators if you were American, and sort of ask them basically for more funding for science and for training. So some people would sort of follow on that path, and then you could go in and become a legislative aide, you could become a policy expert at a variety of different nonprofit or even for-profit organizations. So for example, EBRC is the organization that we don't work for, but they help to organize a lot of things in our field. And so we're sort of the student arm of them. And they have several people that sort of work in this policy space. And so they write white papers, they write analyses of the bioeconomy, and that gets picked up by people in the federal government and has shaped policy and has been explicitly acknowledged in different sorts of documents put out by the White House. And so there's multiple kinds of ways that you can use your degree, both like directly continuing to work at the bench with science yourself, or being a leader in a company, leading a research lab in academia, of course, the familiar option, and then thinking about science and these sort of like higher level structures as well, which I think is a cool and underappreciated career route.
Yeah, I can actually just add, oh, sorry, Ice, do you want to go ahead?
Oh, I have like very small thing to add to Ross, is that like apart from policy, there was a communication angle of the science where like you don't really need a PhD, but like when you have a PhD, you understand not just how the science works, but how the process of science works, right? So there are significant amount of people who get to jump into like academic writings, like how to communicate science in a simple ways. In the past pandemic era, we appreciate a lot more of like how science was explained in simple terms. So definitely, if you like talking with people, explaining things to people, communications in science is like one thing to go, and like is important. Yeah, please.
Yeah, I was gonna follow up on that, and I can give like slightly more specifics, which is like there are a bunch of like research journals like Nature, Science, Cell, Frontiers, and whatever. And all of these people hire, they pay many editors who need technical expertise to sort of figure out like, is this paper relevant or not, and who should review it. So there's like a whole set of jobs there. In addition to, if you work in communications, you can work for like a foundation. So there are, I mean, like the Chan Zuckerberg initiative, like people who give lots of money, like they need people to write them press releases. Your university probably has somebody who needs to write press releases on like what research is going on. In addition to like being a freelancer, so you could be like Ed Yong, who like won the Pulitzer for writing about COVID in the Atlantic. Like it's so broad, like the types of writing you could do. It's super exciting. And then just to like throw even more things out there, like I think also you can, if you have a PhD, like pretty much tomorrow, someone might hire you to be a patent agent, and that pays quite well. So if you want to go into law, and then there's like business development, because all these biotech companies, in addition to employing scientists, like do the science, like think about strategy and things. So yeah, like it's very huge.
Yeah, we see a lot of like combination of PhD, not just PhD MD, but PhD JD, PhD MBA, where people in those fields are going to be like pretty unique in their own field. And I feel like, you know, if you have like broad let's say broad interest, then you'll be very unique in the field, and the job market will just like look for you, they'll just fight for you.
Yeah, patent law in particular is a big area where PhDs can get into, and that can be a really valuable way for you to sort of connect your knowledge and your ability to sort of assess science, or to take somebody's sort of invention that they're trying to patent and figure out how to like communicate that or package that into something like a patent. So there's multiple sides of that as well. Okay, so the next question that we oh, okay. Did you have something, Ava?
Yeah, really quick.
Oh, sure. Yes.
So something else that I've seen a lot of my friends recently do is, as synthetic biology and biology as a whole area is becoming like more high throughput, the ability to like analyze in high volume, like these really large data sets is really impactful. And those are like skills that you'll develop as a PhD student, and that are like directly transferable to data science and the tech world. And so I think like even thinking about how you can fit into like these larger tech networks, a lot of them actually have life science divisions. I think that is like something that's really interesting.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Ava, for that. Okay, so we talked a little bit before, but I'd like to dive in a little bit more now onto, if you are planning to go to graduate school, how do you decide where to go? How do you decide what lab to join? We're going to have more sort of panels specifically on this question, probably early next year for people that are sort of doing their interviews and things like that. But let's just give a little overview right now for when you're doing your sort of search for which schools to apply to. How do you decide what schools to apply to in the first place, and which labs that, you know, you might be interested in there?
I can go first. Okay. Let me do it first. I'll be quick. So when I you know decided to study PhD, I'm from Thailand, so like I have no idea you know how the university system in the US is going on. I know that like you know if you apply and you got admitted, then you know you have a chance to explore more through rotations. That's what I know. So without you know that much knowledge, I was like looking for the place that has like something like a center or like an institute that have people not from you know the single department that comes together to like collaborate and do research. For example, UW that I ended up joining has the Center for Synthetic Biology, and not just one PI in the department that you're working with. You can sort of like work with the people in the center or in the institute that doesn't have to come from the same department. And I feel like that's something that helped me a lot in terms of like choosing which university I will be willing to apply to. Because like if you try to apply to a particular program, I I'm shifting the field, so I don't have a lot of idea if I should go to bioengineering or chemical engineering, or like which program. So I ended up joining or applying to like the program that was more of like multidisciplinary, because I feel like I can leverage my expertise in chemistry that way, to work on the synbio community, something like that. I will go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, I actually had a very similar draw to UW and schools like UW. I think I was coming from a very non-synbio background, and I was just looking for schools that had really strong, like broad communities in the areas that I was interested in. Like I knew I wanted to do microbiological research, and so I was looking at schools that had really strong microbio programs in addition to engineering programs, with a lot of like cross collaboration. Like that interdisciplinary aspect to schools, I think, is something that as synthetic biologists we really value, because that's where our science and engineering sits. And so UW has a really great institute. I'm not going to say the exact same thing as ICE, but yeah, that's basically why I also looked at like that type of school. But I think it's really hard, at least it was for me. Like my PI in undergrad was not synthetic biology, and I didn't really have any faculty members at ASU that were synbio focused. And so I kind of went into it really blind. And I think all of you even coming to an event like this and chatting with all of us, or even seeing which schools are affiliated with EBRC and which PIs are affiliated with EBRC, will give you a better idea of what schools actually have synthetic biology programs and a lot of really good research in those areas. And so I think that's basically, I think you guys are on the right.
Heidi alluded to this at the beginning, but a lot of programs also have rotations, which is one of the draws for me. So there are some programs where you basically apply to a specific lab and that is your lab. For me, I decided to look specifically for programs that had rotations, which is basically you spend 2 months working in one lab, then the next, then a third, then even a fourth if you want to. And that really gets your toes in the water, right? Like you get to see the culture of the lab, you get to see the research, you get to see what projects are funded, how people interact. And I think those are all really valuable things that you will learn in order to make a really educated decision about what lab would be the correct place for you. Of course, that's like once you're already in a school. I also want to zoom out a little bit, and we talk a lot about like the resources and the connections and interdisciplinary, which is all really useful. But we also have like personal things that we look out for. So like location, social, like whether or not you're close to family, things of that nature. And I think those are also really valuable. Grad school is a really difficult time, and you want to make sure that you're in a place that will make you happy, or at least will have the support for you, like if you have some trouble. And so just keep those things in mind. Like, yes, the research is important, but also your personal happiness and well-being should also be up there.
The only like small thing I would add is being sure that there's like more than one person you can see yourself working for at the institution. It's quite easy if there's like a big fancy EPI, like I want to go work for them, and then you show up and they're not hiring. So just kind of like broad interest is helpful. And then also likely you'll do an interview that will be in person. And I think you'll get a lot of information that it's just impossible to get from the website. So it's like good to maybe like apply a little broadly if possible, and then know that you'll like refine and get full information about what's good for you at a later stage.
Yeah, that's great advice, everyone. And I was just gonna say that same thing too that Heidi said. It's like you're applying to a program. There's a few places where you apply directly to a lab, but it's pretty uncommon in the US. In Canada and in other countries, it is more common to directly apply. So in that case, you're going to have to, directly reach out to the professor, and that's a whole nother sort of topic. But yeah, if it is a rotation type thing, give yourself a lot of options where you're going to go. It's really important. And the other thing I wanted to say is give yourself options of different schools that you're applying to as well. Once you're in sort of like a certain tier where a school would be sort of evaluating your application and saying, oh yeah, this is somebody that we would feasibly bring here. There's sufficiently enough experience to demonstrate that they can do this, and they're good grades and all that, or reasonably good grades at least. You're going to get into some tier, and then at that point, they're going to have to evaluate fit. And whether you make that sort of cut can be pretty stochastic. Sometimes you get into a school that you wouldn't expect, and sometimes you don't get into a school you would expect. And so usually if your research interests align a lot with a variety of labs at the Institute, then that's going to help, but you never know. So apply to certainly more than a couple schools, unless as part of your search, you're very interested in certain, for example, geographic locations. But if you're thinking like you want to break into this field and you're willing to go to different schools, different countries, different regions, it's an opportunity to sort of experience somewhere else, and you can give yourself a better chance basically by being a bit broader in your search. But also don't think that you can't get into like a top tier school. I went to MIT for grad school. I didn't expect to get in at all, and I didn't get in to some schools that are sort of lower tier than MIT. So you never know. If you are excited about research somewhere, apply.
We just second that people get into random things. So like, don't cut yourself off. Let them tell you no. Don't say no to yourself.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so when you all were putting together your applications, did you have a strategy for this? How did you keep track of like all these schools and labs that you could feasibly work in? How did you prioritize?
I'll say the obvious thing. You want to make a spreadsheet. So I had like an Excel spreadsheet with all of the schools, the different programs I was interested in, the PIs, links to the websites, just in one central location, the dates of deadlines. I then sort of organized it based on like my top priority schools and sort of mid and such, and of course, based on the deadlines. And so in addition to that, each of the schools, the application is going to be different. So making sure to open the application and look for what essays you have to write and how laborious like the personal information descriptions are. You want to do that sooner rather than later. That's also helpful to write down in the spreadsheet.
Yeah, I did something similar to Gabby, but I think I add like at least three PIs I want to work with into each school I'm trying to apply. Because if it's less than 3 PIs, then you may not have like, enough people to rotate with, because like most of the university will have you rotated for at least like 3 rounds. So I was like, let's just like, explore as much as possible. So if there's a university or like institute that there's only 1 PI or 2 PI I'm interested to work with, I will like, apply only if I am really interested in joining the lab, or maybe like consider reaching out to the lab before I apply. Because like if you apply to that single lab and they are not open, they don't have any open space that year, then you don't want to go there no matter what.
Yeah, you just mentioned reaching out to a lab, and I think somebody else mentioned that earlier as well. Is this necessary to do? Should all of our participants here be doing tons and tons of emails right now?
I think it depends. I think like if you're really interested to join the lab and you have been, reading information about that lab a lot, then I think like it's not bad reaching out, but you don't have to reach out to every lab that you're trying to get into. I would say that, because that could be a lot of work on your end. I think like I would rather like have a well organized SOP and letters that everyone in the department will be happy to see it, rather than like reach out to 10 PIs for each university without any detailed like email to reach out to them. So I would say I get into grad school without reaching out to the PIs, because like I was trying my best to look for the university first and then like figure it out. And at the time I was like, I'm happy to work with anyone in my like top 3 or 4, and that ended up being enough. But yeah, I heard a lot of people who reach out and have a better situation, because they know more about like whether the lab is happy to like take up more than one student in that year now.
I also think that PIs get a million emails. And so if you're not genuine in your email and you're just like mass sending it out to a bunch of PIs, you're going to know. And so I think if you're serious about a lab and you have like reasons that you're really excited about them and you've read their work and it's actually like a genuine response from you and you're just excited to talk to them, I think it's worth sending an email. But I think most of the time PIs are not super receptive to emails until you've actually been accepted to the program. And so I think if I were to go through the process again, I would not like cold email PIs until I got into the program.
But if you decided to and you didn't get any response, then don't feel bad about it. Because PI are very busy. So they may have read it and they're like, oh, I don't have time to respond to this student yet. Maybe I'll respond when they come in, something like that.
Or yeah, I'll respond later, and then a million things get in the way. Yeah, add on to that. I didn't really email anybody before I did my applications. I kind of just showed up, and then like as soon as I was stepping on campus, I was like, "Can I rotate with you?" Blah 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 blah. So it's not essential. I think it can be helpful if you have questions, but make sure your email is clear, concise. They're not going to read a long email, like very short. If you have a couple of questions about the lab, be clear about it. And you can even ask to be put in touch with a grad student currently in the lab, which the PI, it's much easier for them to like Control F and forward it to some student in their lab than it is for them to type out an email. So you can definitely try to get some information that way. But if you're asking, are you taking students this year? Can you put me in touch with one of your grad students so I can ask about the lab? Like very simple asks, then you'll be more likely to get a response than if you send them a wall of text about how amazing you think their research is and so on.
I think also they can't really do anything with that information. I think there's been some discussion on Twitter about like whether this is good advice because it seems very proactive and you're sort of like reaching out, but it's like not clear what the conversation you're supposed to be having is or how it's helpful to them. Because like if you apply, they'll read your personal statement and then that will be like, I think potentially a better venue to like express enthusiasm and for them to sort of bring you into the institution.
Right. And in terms of evaluating your application, right, they're looking at your personal statement and like what your sort of pitch is for why you want to go to the school, why you want to do research as a graduate student, to make sure that you have a good reason to do it, basically. And they're also looking at your letters of reference. And so your email to a professor, like it's the fact that you emailed them and talked to them might not even make it to the committee that's reviewing your applications, right? Maybe they'll be on the committee and then they will, but it's not necessarily likely to occur. But there are occasionally times where a professor can sort of put in a word for a student that they're very interested in. But I think that that's more likely to occur if you've talked to them at like a conference or something, and they've seen your poster or something like that, than if you cold email them. But if you're interested in it, you can certainly try. So speaking of these application materials and what to submit, we're gonna put together sort of a workshop in a office hours on writing personal statements. So we won't get into that too much right now. But maybe our last sort of question before we open it up to audience, we'll just quickly kind of go through what your strategies were on getting letters of reference. Usually schools ask for 3, I think. And so did you have a particular strategy in terms of who you asked to write your letters for you?
Yeah, so if you have done research in your undergrad or like in whenever you're doing like either like from work or from wherever, please ask them to write a reg letter for you, because applying to grad school is mostly about you doing research. So if you've been doing research in an undergrad with a professor for like 3 years, then they have been seeing you improve in like doing research for 3 years, and they'll be like a very strong recommender. And most of the time you stick with that person more than 2 or 3 years, they technically should be happy to help you, recommend you to move forward in the next step. There was some some suggestion. I didn't do it myself, but like people who go to work, even though they're not working in the research, but you work in sort of like science and management things, that can probably help recommend you in that angle as well, because PhD is not just doing research alone. You have to manage a lot of stuff going on throughout your PhD. So that could be another, good recommendation if you have work experience. Let's say that you're working right now, and that's what you've been doing every day. So.
I was just going to give some other general letter recommendation requesting advice, which one thing I did when I was an undergrad was try to spread my requests out between professors, because I thought it would be less work for them, but it actually creates more work, because probably what they're going to do is they're going to write you one letter and then like just change it a little bit for each institution. So I think just like pick your 3 favorite people, which I think for me, it was like people I'd done research with, and I'd done a summer program. So I just asked the person that I'd worked with for the summer program, but they were like, please just ask one of us and then just give us an email with like all of the dates and sort of where they're going to go. And then it's clear, and then they can sort of do it. And the other thing is like, also ask if they will write you sorry, it's really noisy here. Ask if they'll write you a strong letter of recommendation. Because I did have an instance once where someone I've worked with asked me for a letter of recommendation, but like our working, like it hadn't been like particularly awesome. And so I was like, okay, I will write you a letter. But yeah, I don't know, like try to like ask if they'll write you something good, because they might say, no, I can't do that. And then, or maybe they'll say yes, and it'll be mediocre. But I think it's nice if you can like screen for some enthusiasm on their side.
And
Another
besides-
option.
Oh, sorry, Gabby, go ahead.
This was really quick, but another option is to go to your academic advisor or someone you've taken classes with. So I did that 2-year gap year. I had my one PI, of course, from where I was working, but then I actually kept in touch with my academic advisor from undergrad throughout the time, and I still talk to her still. So I took her class, kept in touch. She knew my research trajectory. She knew what was changing, and that also provides a really good connection for a strong letter.
I'm not sure if there's going to be a international student trying to apply and like listen to this video. But if you ever have a research experience outside of your country, let's say you are applying to the US university, and you have come for a visit to work in the US system before, getting a recommendation from the PI who worked in the US is going to be pretty helpful, because they know that you're capable of working in this environment.
Okay, great.
Very much. Okay, sorry.
No, please, go ahead.
I very much like tailored my application writers or my letters of reference writers to the schools that I was applying to. And so if I knew that this PI that I've interacted with heavily has like connections to that school and has like either like collaborators or has research that's very similar, like I asked them to write my letter of recommendation. And so I had 2 people that I was like switching in and out based on the school. And then I had my undergrad PI and then my PI for my summer experience. And so I think what Heidi is saying is probably the better way of doing it, and like not burdening so many people. But in the way that I did it, I did like 2 people for everything and then switching out in and out the third. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So I'd like to follow on something that I started mentioning, of which there were several questions in the form, which is about international students and how the applications might differ for somebody coming from outside of the US, or you're applying to anywhere outside of the country that you came from. So could you talk a little bit about your experience with that? I think everybody else is not international, right? Okay.
Yeah, so I actually applied to like another institute in Germany, and they have like completely different process of like admitting you into a PhD program. So most of like European countries, they have like a separate master and PhD programs. So they usually take PhD student in only if you graduated or you're graduating from master degree. So and the letter and the organization of the application like package is fairly different. Because like in that case, in the case of like European countries, it will be more like a job like posting. So like the PI will like apply for grants that can support like up to 3 PhD students throughout the project. They'll post it on the job market, and you apply as a master graduate to get that into that PhD job. So you know, it's like whatever you've been preparing for an application in the US can be repurposed to a certain extent, but you have to tailor it in a way that like is more appropriate for the job, for each job, because they will be like, let's say they require like omics skill, then you have to like say that you have done any kind of like experiment that that was related to that kind of skills that they're requiring in their job description. One thing that is pretty interesting is that like there'll be visit weekends for each university, right? For the US, they usually don't, you know, but it's a lot of work on the visa side and like doing a lot of stuff to make international students come and visit. But in Europe, it's not that hard, because if you get the Schengen visa, then you can practically like travel around different countries without that much difficulty. So they tend to invite international people more in Europe. And I did visit for like a week, because they are in a system that like you have to join the lab. Like if you come into the program, you need a lab right away, and you're not taking any class. You will be working right away from day one. So that's a real difference between like the US system and like the other system that like require the master. So I think that's mostly it. I'm not entirely sure about like some other system in Asia or in the other parts like Australia, that they usually adopt either kind of system, like a kind of 5-year PhD where you come take class, develop your skills along the way, or the place where you have to come with like enough skills that you can start working from day one and get things done in maybe 3 years.
Yeah, and I'll say it is generally harder as an international student to get into a program. My understanding of it is that they tend to have more spots allocated towards nationals of the given country for programs that hire sort of cohorts of students. And so that can be a challenge for international students for sure. And if you're like really wanting to not be in this school that you're interested in being in, or sorry, the country that you're currently in, then we would sort of encourage you to look at multiple different countries and not say just the US. You might have to have a broader search. You might have to apply to more schools to sort of give yourself that extra opportunity to make up for sort of the statistical disadvantage that you have, which is just an unfortunate part of it. Something that I think is worth mentioning as well is that different countries will have different opportunities for fellowships and things like that, scholarships, etc., for international students. And so I forget off the top of my head, maybe Ice can talk about this a little bit, but compared to a national of a given country, you'll have many fewer usually fellowship opportunities. But there are some countries that are very welcoming. They're trying to grow their research enterprise and catch up with places like the US. And so they have more opportunities open to non-citizens, basically.
Yeah.
Ice, do you want to talk a little bit about?
Yeah. So let me mention, for each country, they usually have a specific scholarship that is not for, the nationals as well. Like, let's say, like if you're looking for Fulbright scholarship, which is like for people who want to come and study in the US, it's not for the US people, right? Because you need to be like outside the country and apply and come to the US. And the other countries have this kind of scholarship as well. There will be like, the government scholarship. And the people you're competing with is the people outside of the country. So that's sort of like, separate the pool of applicants into like 2 different type of, applicants, whether you have the nationality or you don't. There are several opportunities related to the union as well. Let's say like in Europe, there might be some scholarships that allow you to work in any country as long as it's in EU or something like that. So definitely, check it out. Like if you have like the place you want to go, the team you want to work with, check if there is a scholarship or like opportunity available in that institution first, and then like in the country, and maybe in the bigger landscape. There are like broad variety of funding that you can get from. So please don't be afraid of like applying to those kind of scholarships, because like if you prepare for one, then you can tailor it to like apply to the other one as well. And you will never know, maybe if you join the institute, you may have another kind of opportunity to apply to the internal ones, or another kind of fellowship from a company close by that can help you during your research or during your PhD study as well. Yeah. So again, we were having that workshop soon, right? Ross and Alva. So if you're, even though it's not specifically to the scholarship or like fellowship that you're applying for, they will have like similar format enough that like it can help you tailor your application package.
Yeah, I'll post the link. I have the registration form for that available, so I'll post that in the chat briefly. But there's a question in the Q&A, and if somebody can follow up on this while I do that, it says, it's from Caesar, what other countries are doing strong SynBio research? So good time to highlight sort of what's going on globally and not just in the US. Great question, Caesar.
Let me mention, in Australia, there are active like panels. I think like it's in Perth in Australia that they host like this SynBio workshop like twice a year. So there's something going on in Australia for sure. There was a synthetic biology program at Imperial College London. So in UK, there are a lot of like SynBio stuff going on. I know that there are like several institutes in the UK that are working on this. Like the other one that I see a lot of work coming from is like Manchester Institute of Biotechnology. I used to like try to apply so that I can go see soccer, football every week as well. So like, if you're interested in, the other kind of life related thing, you like to play soccer, I think like UK would be a better place compared to US, where like you may want to, explore yourself with different kind of sports, something like that. In Europe, there are a lot of SynBio stuff going on. If you're interested in like microbial cell factories, for example, in Denmark and in the Scandinavian countries, like I'm not sure if Norway has a lot of things going on, but like in Denmark, there's a lot of SynBio institute that you might be interested in. So yeah, there's a lot of opportunity out there, not just in the US. Maybe something in Canada.
Yes, mostly at a couple of schools. University of Toronto has some. University of British Columbia is trying to grow its synthetic biology, so check it out. They have a whole new building that we're making that will be done supposedly in about a year, but we all have bets on when it's actually going to be finished. This is for the bioengineering program, but the bioengineering program at UBC is very interested in growing synthetic biology, and Canada in general is interested in growing this space. So if you're interested in Canada, it's a very welcoming place to non-citizens or to immigrants. There's actually a relatively easy path to get to permanent residency in Canada. And so that's another thing that you can consider is sort of where can you see yourself after grad school? Is it a place where it'll be easier or harder for you to get a permanent job? Part of that goes into the market that's available, although you have to project that ahead 5 years, but it's also sort of the policies that the countries have in place for immigrants. And so definitely worth checking out. Okay, so there's a couple of questions in the chat. So Benjamin, could have you maybe elaborate on yours a little bit. Says, hello everyone, the meeting is very nice. I'm a graduate of genetics and biotechnology. I'm a young researcher. I would like them, which I'm guessing means young researchers, to be able to carry out a mentoring program for young researchers, recent graduates. However, it would be cooler if it was in our native language. Now, this is something like important, and I'd say that like EBRC and other institutes are trying to basically make science and engineering, biology, and so on more inclusive. is anybody aware of, for example, like different language types of like websites, resources, podcasts, even things like that?
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure. But I believe like there must be some initiatives going on in each country. I know that in Korea there are some podcasts or some interesting things going on from my friends. I was doing similar thing in Thailand, like speaking Thai. So if you wanna, if there is none and you wanna do it by yourself, and if there is anything EBRC can help, just let us know. Maybe we can share resources.
I do think that there are active efforts in iGEM to help bridge this gap. And I think they work definitely more on the international stage with like helping to fulfill these goals in the discourse across, I guess, many countries. I think EBRC right now is unfortunately very limited to the States in its implementation.
Mhm.
I also know some grad programs, I guess not even grad programs, but like different universities have like graduate groups, like affinity groups style. And some of those affinity groups specifically have programs in native languages to help with application processes. So like, for example, LGSA, Latino grad student organization that's here, we'll have some of these like more informal or like one-on-one sessions. And so maybe even reaching out to, a specific university, a specific grad program could also be an option.
Yeah, thanks. I posted a version of this that exists at MIT. It's called the BE Application Assistance Program, or BEAP, as we lovingly called it. So this is a program that's mostly angled at people coming from sort of underrepresented backgrounds to get some help on their applications. So especially if you are looking for advice on like English writing and proficiency, like if you're an English language learner, it's a great resource to get some feedback on that. Because, as much as we try to dissociate like the sort of this aspect of writing English, it's inevitable that people will get judged, whether through sort of inherent bias or not, on their like English proficiency, even if what you're saying is sort of, really great and excellent. If it comes off like if you're an English language learner, it can just like come off a little bit wrong, and then that can lead to biases against your application. And so there's a couple of resources like this that you can try to use to do that. But this is like a whole big question in science, and so much of it is done in English. How to we make this more accessible to people not having English as their first language, basically, because it's not just your applications to grad school, but it's also the papers that you write and everything that will be judged on this. And so it's an unfortunate reality of science, but hopefully we can sort of as a community get better and first of all, treat each other better if we're learning English, and then also make science sort of more generally accessible. Okay, so going down in the Q&A, it says, I've found labs at unis that have really interested me, but I'm having trouble deciding on departments within the university to apply to. For example, BioE versus Chemi. Some research will be great fits, but in the Chemi department, but as someone with mostly BioE training, I was worrying about coursework and qualifying exams in departments outside of bioengineering. Do we have any advice? I think we can talk a little bit about sort of switching fields in a little bit more of the on the ground, what that looks like when you're in these programs.
I guess I mean, as someone who thought about this, except I was like a chemi trying to decide if I should go into BioE. I think like from like a long-term perspective, the name on your degree doesn't matter. But I guess you're mostly just like thinking about this from the perspective of the coursework and the qualifying exam, which may be important. I think I mean, I had a chemi undergrad degree, and I found my chemi grad courses to be incredibly challenging. And it was like, I almost didn't pass my qualifying exams, but like I made it by the skin of my teeth. So I think the courses might be challenging no matter what. And so maybe what I would ask is like, is it value added to you to be able to say that you've taken those classes? Like I think a lot of the chemi classes on like chemical reaction kinetics or like fluid mechanics can be useful if you're like doing math modeling and these kinds of things. But yeah, if it's not going to be useful to you, then maybe you could reconsider it. I know there are kind of strict rules about whether or not you can work for a chemi or BE professor. So if you like really love the chemi professor, that's a reason to go. But at Caltech, where I went to grad school, you could actually work for anybody. So I was in the chemi program and ended up working for a BE professor. So maybe I would check sort of what the rules are. And if it's like very, very strict, then I would of course pick the program that lets me work with the person that I want to work for. And I'm sure you can figure the coursework out. But other than that, I think, yeah, the program actually doesn't matter too much, because if you think about your like 5-year degree, you've got like a year of coursework. So like 80% of what you're going to do is really like the advisor. So that matters more. I don't know if anybody else has any other thoughts.
Yeah, I think Caltech is the outlier there. I think most schools are definitely like you have to join a program with that your PI is affiliated with in order to join their lab. I think almost like the majority of schools that I applied to and got into.
Yeah, I think.
And so,
Yeah, just wanna like second that. But what Ava said, that I actually have that kind of problem as well when I was applying. But I think it depends on the school. Caltech may allow that because like it depends on how many faculties and how many students they have, and like if the school tends to be more multidisciplinary, they can sort of like negotiate through that. And in the school where the populations are not that huge, they can be more flexible. And like for here at UW, as Ava said, if you apply to chemistry, you have to like work with the chemistry team. If you apply to chemistry, you should be working with the chemistry team, something like that. So maybe an alternative way is like the program that I was in is actually an interdisciplinary program. So there are these kind of programs coming in across the states, and it will be pretty good if you are trying to look to work for not just one faculty, but like several faculties from different institutes, and that could be a choice. So in my program, we don't have a department. It's just an institute, and every PI who were affiliated with the institute actually has their own department. So for us as a PhD student, we have to work on ourselves, like where you want to work with, and like explore across the campus, and just figure it out where do you want to end up with. Like at the end of the day, you'll be working in terms of like the documentation, everything with the host department, not your own PhD department. That will at least like allow you to like figure it out when you got into the program already and joined the lab already, and then like worry about the other stuff. There's also like the coursework direction in these kind of programs. There'll be more research focused. So the qualifying exam of my program was changed into like preliminary exam, and it's just about like whether you are ready to do research, not like how good you are at ODE, because not all of us are taking the same course.
Yeah, thanks. And I just want to highlight that synthetic biology and bioengineering are inherently interdisciplinary. So it's not expected that you know everything before you come in. It's often preferred to be able to sort of get people from different backgrounds and to bring them in and to bring those perspectives to engineering cells, right? So people with hardcore like electrical engineering are a lot of the founders of synthetic biology, people from like computer science, electrical engineering, but also people that were really hardcore into molecular biology and sort of studying how molecular machines inside of cells work. And the fusion of this is sort of what got things going. So if you're not totally sure you have the right background for the departments, like you can definitely make a case for yourself. And this comes to the sort of personal statement type thing. You come to our fellowship workshop, we'll sort of work with you on developing your story, which helps for that part of it. But certainly the sort of switch in course material can be a challenge. One thing that my department did was for people coming in that weren't necessarily having all of the requirements for either the engineering background that was expected or the biology background that was expected, then they were sort of made to take some undergrad classes actually to sort of catch up. So some grad programs and others have more or less class workloads than others. For mine, we just had to take 6 classes, and you only had to take like 1 in the first semester or 2, and then at least 1 core class in the second semester. And so if you needed to, you could take some undergrad courses to sort of catch yourself up on material before you dived more into some of the grad courses, or just take a bunch of classes all at once while you're doing rotations, since you're not kind of jumping into your thesis yet anyway. So there are sort of mechanisms that departments will put in place to help catch you up if you're sort of lacking in sort of one sort of background or another. That can lead to more work that you have to do when you enter grad school, but it can be worth it for you to be able to learn those things and sort of be able to bring them to your research. Okay. I see there have been some questions answered in the chat already. So I'm going to try to find the next one that hasn't been answered yet. So there's a question from Kevin about, do international PhD, oh, you beat me to it. But if you just want to say out loud what you replied.
Yeah, I was saying that, like, well, GPA and letter of recommendations are still applying, but like, no matter where you're applying for in the PhD program, your research experience is the most important thing. So if you are going for the program that was like a 3 years PhD, then they will be emphasizing much more in that research experience, or at least like how prepared you are to work in a PhD. Because like if they're the program that doesn't provide coursework, then you have to like jump in and do it right away, right? So maybe it doesn't mean that you have to be ready to do whatever experiment that they're listing, but like if you have background in like how to conduct research, that means that like you're gonna take like 2 months to learn how to do new experiment or new setup, instead of like taking 6 months to learn new techniques and like that. So I feel like in terms of background, they will not be that different, but they may weight it differently depending on what type of program you're getting into. Yeah, and like for those of you who are preparing for these kind of things, if there is any specific questions, if you're in the future SBA, like please feel free to like drop more questions in, and it may not be just us who can answer these kind of questions. There are people in EBRC who may have different backgrounds and different experiences that can help you. It might be more specific that way.
Yeah, so I just put in a link. So we put in the option into the registration form to sign up for our Slack. And if you have like more questions you want to ask, especially very specific questions about sort of your situation or about a specific lab or school that you're interested in, please go onto the Slack, post away, don't be shy. There's 200 some people on the Slack, and we can try to connect you with somebody maybe in a lab that you're interested in, which several students last year when we had this panel were able to sort of take advantage of. So like I said, don't be shy, like come hang out with us on the Slack. We're happy to answer any more questions on there or dive a little bit deeper into sort of your situations that you might have, or just any sort of questions. So if you didn't sign up for it, I put the link into the chat so you can sign up there. Yeah, we have maybe another 5 minutes of questions. I'm trying to look now to see if there's anything we haven't answered yet. Okay, let me go to the set of questions real quick. I know there's a topic that we haven't talked about yet. Okay, yeah, so, okay, before I do my thing, Megan has a question. How many programs did each of you apply to in total? Lightning round. 9 or 10 for me, I forget.
12. No, I was gonna apply to 12, I applied to 10, sorry.
Liar. Just kidding.
I did
I think I-
7. I did 7
I
in my
did 7
first round.
too.
Yeah. My second round was 6. Yeah. I did it twice.
I did 3, but I was dumb.
But you got in.
Yeah. This is like, you should talk to people for advice. Like, I think I didn't really understand. I was like, there's like 3 places I want to go to. I'll apply to those 3.
Mhm.
Would have been much wiser to apply widely.
Yeah, my PI at the time told me like you only apply to grad school once, hopefully. And so like you want to shoot for the stars and like this is the time to do it. And like if money is an issue, like you can always reach out to admissions offices because they give you waivers for the admissions fee or the application fee rather. So that's also really useful.
Mhm.
Yes, it can be quite expensive. A lot of schools thankfully have started to waive the GRE, which saves you a lot of money. But if you have any concern about the cost, like please reach out to somebody at the department. They will make it happen for you. All right.
Yeah,
And at
that,
most conferences, they will give you fee waivers. So if you like go and talk to the people at the conference, like if you're going and presenting your undergrad research, they'll give you a fee waiver.
yeah, for those international applicants, it might be harder to get a waiver. But that's why you may have to like, select the schools to apply like properly. But in terms of TOEFL or like scores that you have to, take the test and do things, you can talk with you can talk with the schools whether like, if the score is gonna apply sooner or later than the date that they provided. They can manage that. I think like I applied to UW twice. That's what, and then I figured out later that they actually keep our scores. They're not going to delete it ever. So we don't actually have to like take the test for the second time for like $200 or whatever.
Yeah, so related to this, there were some questions in the form about whether to do a gap year, whether it was useful or actually a problem to sort of do like a year in industry or something like that before going to grad school. I would generally say this is like, very situational, depending on the person, but for those of you that did or didn't do gap year type things, what do you think?
First thing first, gap year is not, mandatory. So if you have like some goals that you want to use that gap year for, I think go for it. If you are like very confident you want to go into grad school that way, go straight. Like I find my gap year to be very useful because I'm shifting field from city chemistry to like molecular biology and things, and that was like a pretty big shift in my opinion. And I was working around like different situations. I didn't join the grad school in the first round. I decided to take that as like take a chance to do a gap year, and I come back and I feel like I'm more ready to do PhD for real. Because at the time I feel like even doing a half-baked decision to give me a chance back. This is it's a long time doing a PhD.
For me, we'll just stay on the trajectory of people who did gap years. I thought it was also particularly useful for me. And I've already sort of alluded to some of these things, but one, I also shifted field. It was a great way to see that like this is the place that I want to be. 2, I got sort of the inside scoop, right? So I was a research associate. I was surrounded by postdocs, grad students, undergrads, PIs, and it's like a very different perspective to be in that position, but also hear advice from all these different people. Another thing is you're making money, right? So straight out of undergrad, you can have loans and debt. And so having a little bit of money is quite useful. Another thing that I mentioned is papers, pens. Typically, this is a really good time to just delve into research and you can get some really cool rewards from that. And then, yeah, I think that's most of it.
Yeah, and if you're looking for like a little bump in your research experience before you apply to try to like get your application to that next tier, so to speak, whether you decide to do like a research associate type position for a year or a master's can be an interesting decision point. Does anybody have any thoughts about that? That there's many different forms that a master's can take, but one example is the 1-year bridge master's where you do it at the same school and it's kind of like an extension of your bachelor's. BSMS programs, I know UW has one. Another would be to, for example, go to a different school and start a 2 or 3 year master's there. Hopefully not 3 years, but more like the typical 2 years. What are you guys' thoughts on like a master's versus a research associate type position?
So I did both. I was working on an MSBS, sorry, BSMS, because like I was taking masters like lectures during my undergrad, and it's just doing research to get the degree. So I decided to do that to gain more experience in research in my like undergrad and master. And then I decided to join a new institute at the time. It's a completely new institute and school. So I get a chance to work on not just science, but like how to set up a lab, how to make sure that the layout of the building is appropriate to doing research. Where should the water line go? Like I was in charge of that as well. And that's a pretty fun experience. So I would say like, it has the advantages on its own way. So whatever you see, like, that you're gonna learn from doing or spending that gap year, I think like that's gonna be useful no matter what. And it's up to you. I mean, like doing the SMS may have to be planned earlier on. Otherwise, like it may be tough to do a 1-year master, like right from BS, if you don't have that prepared. But if you have it planned already, like shoot for it.
I want to say one more thing. I'm sorry, and then I will let other people talk. But specifically about doing that gap year, working as a research associate or as a tech, I think that there is a huge distinction between being a tech and a research associate. And for example, if you are a tech, sometimes you will just be doing like manual labor, right? You will just be pipetting, you'll just be cloning, and you don't have any input into actual designs of projects, which I don't think for me would have been useful at all. And so I went into my interviews for different positions, like asking the PI specifically, like what my roles and responsibilities were going to be. And so the reason why I chose the lab I did was because I was basically a grad student at the time. I had my own projects. I had an undergrad working with me. I had freedom to do what I wanted and actually explore. And so that was probably one of the biggest things. I wasn't being told what to do. I was given the freedom to actually explore on my own. So just wanted to also put that out there.
Yeah, that's a great point because they're looking for in your application whether you can sort of become somebody that leads a research project eventually, right? So the more that you've had some ownership over what you do as an undergraduate, the better. So if you've had 6 months sort of leading a research project of your own, that might not seem like a lot, but that's probably a lot more valuable than 2 years of somebody just being told what to do. So in your applications, even if you don't have a lot of like time doing research experience, try to emphasize what you have been driving or what you've been sort of in charge of, how much or like what thought you've put into your projects that you've worked on, because that's what they want to know is like where your sort of like development as a scientist is. And a lot of that development as a scientist is not just the techniques you learn, which is of course important to master, but like how you think as a scientist and how you will sort of run a project and take on challenges and things like that. So yes, okay. So maybe the last question that we'll answer, and then I'll do my outro, and then we'll end the meeting. So Eddie asked, I already have some research experience, but I'm considering joining the BSMS program at my university and waiting another year to apply to PhD programs. Are there any potential downsides to taking this extra year to build further research experience? I'd probably say not any downsides to it, just besides the extra time before you start your program. And if it costs you money to pay to do the master's, then the cost of that. But it'll give you more experience and it will certainly make you a more competitive PhD applicant. So you'll have to weigh those against each other. If you're not sure, you can apply to it and also PhD programs at the same time, and then sort of see what you get. But if you get into a PhD program that you want to go to, I would probably just go to it instead of continuing on with a master's. But I don't know, like, does anybody have any different thoughts about that?
I think I would definitely weigh how many classes you have to take for your master's, right? Like if your goal is to get research experience and beef up your like background in whatever new area you want to learn in, I think if you're taking classes, that's going to take time away from you actually putting it into research. And so I think a lot of the things that Gabby was like talking about earlier, in terms of like research associate positions, a lot of companies actually also do those, where you can like work for them for a year. There's a student that's interested in a lab that took a year between grad and undergrad to do like a research associate position at a company, and then now is coming to graduate school. And she got a lot of research experience because that was her only job during that time. And so I think I would really weigh at where your time is going, because if you're just doing classes and you're paying money to do those classes instead of getting the experience that you want, it might not necessarily be worth it.
One way that a master's can be useful though, if you're continuing in the same lab that you were in before, you're just kind of gaining more experience with that, which can be great. But if you use your master's to sort of test out a field, that can be an effective way to make sure you're not sort of overcommitting to do something that you don't want to do. But I think that also goes back to our comments on when you're applying to a school, make sure there's options. That way, when you show up and you start doing your rotations, if you decide, oh, you know what, I hate synthetic biology, cloning is the absolute worst, and never want to touch that again, there's other options for you available, so if you're thinking like, do I even want to do a PhD, then a master's can be a good way to kind of give you a bit more of a taste of research without having to fully commit to doing a PhD. Although if you start doing your PhD and you get along and you decide you don't want to do it anymore, there's sometimes options to sort of drop out with the master's as well. It's not a typical path, but it can happen. So it's not like you're forced to necessarily finish it. But that's like a whole other thing. We won't dive into that. But yeah, so there could be some benefits. Okay, I think we'll end it there. So thank you to the panel. Thank you for all of you for coming and participating in this. Thanks for your questions. We always like engagement. We'd love continued engagement on our Slack if you'd like, and of course, for you to attend the upcoming panels and workshops that we have planned on this series for applying to grad school. Hopefully those will be useful resources for everyone. This has been a production of the Engineering Biology Research Consortium Student and Postdoc Association. For more information about EBRC, you can visit the website at ebrc.org. It's a great organization. It does a lot related to engineering biology, road mapping the science, thinking about policy, funding, all kinds of things. So definitely check it out. If you're a graduate student right now, if you are, say, a master's student, you can actually apply to become a member of the SPA. It's for master's and PhD and postdocs. So I will put a link to that chat if you'd like to do that. This is a recording that we will put onto our YouTube channel eventually. So if you'd like to share it with your friends or anything, you can check it out there or review back to it. There's also the version of this meeting from last year that's on there, so you can check that out and get the different takes from our panelists from last year as well. A big thank you in general to all of the SPA outreach leaders. So Ava and ICE are involved in other outreach initiatives as well. So thank you to them, and also for their additional help in being panelists here, as well as Coxie Lee, who's another great outreach leader we have in SPA. And finally, we'll just say thanks to EBRC for their support with these types of programs. If you do join the SPA, you'll see that it's a really great staff that they have at EBRC. And if you want to do outreach initiatives, if you want to get into this community, they're very helpful at sort of helping you have an impact. And so we hope that we see you all in the future, and that get into this field if you want to, and that we can continue to grow this community in an effective way and an inclusive way as well. All right, that's it.
Thank you, Ross. Thank you, everyone.